All right, well, welcome everyone to another Veeam webinar. This is called Hybrid Cloud Demo, your definitive guide to successful workload migrations. And as that title might suggest, we're going to go into a number of demos within this. But before we do that, we do have to jump into some market data on what's really fueling this workload migration component. And that's really one of the great things about Veeam. We have this data freedom pillar, and it's that ability to mobilize your applications and data securely across different platforms and infrastructures as your organizational changes need, and making sure that those applications and data are as resilient as possible at their source where they live today during that migration, as well as where they might land in the future, be that continuing on premises, in the public cloud, through a variety of different models. We're going to go into that in a little bit though. My name's Sam Nicholls. I'm the Senior Director of our public cloud, Kubernetes and as a service business here at Veeam. So definitely look after a lot of these kind of modern ways of running, hosting applications and data, particularly in the public cloud, whether that is hosted on the cloud, cloud-based or cloud native. So let's dive into this and get started. So there are a number of conditions out there right now that are accelerating this change, this need to be able to mobilize our applications and data. And the first up is application modernization. We live in a world where that monolithic three-tiered application structure, right? You've got your web server, your app server, and your database is very, very much commonplace. And absolutely not saying that that's a bad thing, but certainly ways of building and running applications has changed quite a lot over the last few years. And that the modernization of applications allows us to be more scalable, it allows us to innovate and iterate faster, and that ultimately allows our business to be a lot more competitive. Then we've got some market changes going on, right? Particularly with vendors that you standardize on right now. Maybe their direction does or doesn't align with the values that you have within your organization or what you would like out of your data, your infrastructure. And that is kind of forcing your hand to look at alternatives or maybe just accelerate the move to alternatives if it were already planned. And then finally is the technical debt, right? There's a lot of acquisitions going on out there right now when we acquire an organization. We're not just acquiring the organization as people, but also that technical debt, right? So maybe they have built and run their applications in a completely different way to how you do it right now. You need to evolve the way that those are being run currently. And you also need to make sure that that is protected in line with your organizational standards. Now, with these changes, it ultimately lands us in this hybrid and multi-cloud world. And I love this graphic, this chart. It's from our data protection trends report in 2024, so the most recent one. And we've been running this for 4, maybe even 5 years now. So it gives us a real nice look at trend lines as our infrastructures and platforms that we use evolve over time. So, starting back in 2020 and physical servers in your data center, we can see a pretty significant decline with that over the last few years. No surprises there. Virtual machines on hosts within your data center, a little bit more, still a decline, but less so. But then what's really interesting is the hosted virtual machines within a hyperscale service provider like AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, or within a regional or sovereign service provider. Those are really growing. And one of the other things that this really kind of makes you think about is, okay, like it seems like it's growing more on the cloud side than it is decreasing on the physical and VMs. That's because we just got new workloads being instantiated, and the de facto standard for a lot of organizations is to do that in the cloud, right? But this chart is only showing virtual machines within the public cloud. There's a number of different ways that you can run workloads in the public cloud. Maybe we leverage PaaS, right? Platform as a service. So these are, fully managed hosted databases or file shares, containers, microservices, even serverless functions in the public cloud. So this gives us a good, well-rounded approach, but there's absolutely different ways of running stuff in the cloud. So as we start to look at, what are our options when it comes to migrating? We've got, a macro decision to make. Do we want to continue to run that on premises, or do we want to run it on the cloud? Again, whether that's a public cloud hyperscaler, whether that's a regional service provider. And I think as we look at how our workloads are hosted right now, one of the big things to consider is physical machines, right? They still absolutely have their time and place. So those dedicated Windows and Linux servers on a physical machine, and we can build our applications that way. We've also got alternate virtualization methodologies, right? So, this is looking at, okay, obviously VMware vSphere is the 800-pound gorilla in the market, but there are a lot of other alternatives, right? Microsoft has had Hyper-V for many, many, many years. Nutanix with their Acropolis hypervisor, as well as even Proxmox right now. And this is one of the things that we are seeing in the industry with some of the changes at VMware by Broadcom is we want to look at alternate hypervisors to run our workloads in the data center. One of the other completely viable options is stay the course as well, right? vSphere is that 800-pound gorilla for a reason. It is an incredibly broad and deep platform with the best feature set on the market. And despite some of the changes being made, maybe those feature sets, those capabilities, that market prowess is just going to lead us to stay the course. And again, that's absolutely fine. Now, as we start to look at the cloud, we can look at a number of different options. And the first off is that cloud infrastructure, or infrastructure as a service, IaaS. And this is really just running our workloads in the cloud, the same as we would on premises, right? So I referenced earlier that monolithic three-tiered architecture. We can absolutely do that in the cloud. And these hyperscalers have their own flavor of virtual machines in the cloud. In AWS, it's called Amazon EC2, Azure VMs, and then Google Cloud have compute engine VMs as well. And again, that's a completely fine and viable option. And then the final one is looking at cloud PaaS, or platforms as a service. So this is as we start to modernize our applications, start to decouple that monolithic architecture and go with things like hosted databases, file shares, containers. It's also important to note that things like PaaS and containers can also be run on premises, right? So AWS has their it's Amazon Outposts. So that's that way to leverage AWS infrastructure, but on premises. Equally with container orchestration engines like Kubernetes, we can choose to run that in the cloud on PaaS like Amazon EKS or Azure AKS. But there's a variety of other flavors that we can run on the cloud or on premises as well. So decisions. There's lots of different ways that we can choose to go. And maybe the one that we choose at first might not be the right fit for our organization. Maybe it's just a temporary measure. And the ability to bounce between all of these different options, I think, is really critical for an organization, again, from a transitionary perspective as they look to modernize applications, look to adopt new platforms. But that's not always as easy as it is said than done. But again, we'll double click into that in a little bit. So we've got some great survey data here from you guys. And these 3 questions that we asked, I think, are really critical to this presentation. And it's really kind of what we use to steer what demos that we show you today, because we put these webinars on for you guys, not for us. So this is looking at the current state, right? What environments are you running today? So we kind of look at the bottom, like virtualization, physical machines, on premises, absolutely has the lion's share of the market. But, IaaS, PaaS, containers, even VMs on containers, again, we'll get into that in a little bit, are showing a very significant share in that market as these changes really start to take hold. Then we asked you guys the question, are you considering migrating to new platforms? And this was really eye-opening as well. There's still a third of you guys are unsure, undecided right now. And again, that's absolutely fine. And this is where things like Veeam and our data freedom can really come into play, because you can make a decision tomorrow and the platform will adapt with you. Now, just over 16% of you guys are looking to make that change in more than 12 months. Almost a third of you guys are looking to make that change in less than 12 months. And then, just over 20% of you guys know, like, I want to stay the course that we shared on those slides a couple of slides ago. So again, lots of options out there, lots of decisions to be made, lots of organizations going in different directions. But if we double click into the yes greater, yes less than 12 months, where are you guys looking at placing that data, those applications in the future? And this is super interesting, right? So physical machines, we see that drop. An alternate hypervisor, interesting at about 42%. IaaS, right? So those VMs on the cloud is the preferred destination. Again, based on those survey results at almost 46%. And then we do see that increased adoption of things like platform as a service. So again, those fully managed hosted databases, file shares, we've got containers, and again, we've got VMs on Kubernetes as well. And again, I'll get into that in just these next few slides on why that's so important. Now, as we move data and applications across different platforms, we've got a couple of different options, right? Again, if we're moving it and running the application in the very same way, that's called lift and shift, right? So we can lift and shift a physical machine to a virtual machine or to a public cloud IaaS instance. But a lot of organizations are undergoing that refactoring. So going away from something that is very traditional, again, monolithic, three-tiered, very infrastructure-centric, to something that is modern, decoupled, API-driven, very application-centric. And that transformation is pretty significant, which we'll go to in a little bit. But it's not just this huge, massive jump from traditional to modern. There's lots of things that you can do in between. So again, we've got the cloud hosted option, lift and shift. We're still running that application in a monolithic way. We're just leveraging cloud VMs instead of on-premises virtual machines or physical machines. So that application looks, smells, functions just like it did on premises, except it's just running in the public cloud. So again, some good examples there. Amazon EC2, Azure VMs, Google Cloud Compute Engine VMs. And then instead of going all the way to cloud native, we can start to reshape those applications. So this is where we start to decouple some of those services, but we don't fully decouple the application. And that might be going to things like PaaS. So again, a cloud database, maybe Azure SQL or Azure Cosmos DB. Maybe it's Amazon RDS or DynamoDB. Maybe we're leveraging different file shares like Azure Files or Amazon EFS or FSX. Maybe we're going to things like data warehouses or data lakes. So Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Good example there, but more of a stepping stone towards that cloud native approach. And again, this is why I mentioned earlier on that ability to jump between those different decisions is very, very critical, because taking a few small steps is easier, gives you a little bit more time, gives you the ability to take advantage of some of the things like that application modernization has to offer without fully undergoing that full application transformation to something that is cloud native. So again, very loosely coupled. We're looking at microservices like containers or even serverless, leveraging things like functions. We've gone from a waterfall release to a very agile release, imperative API driven to declarative APIs. And I've already gone through some of the examples there, like Kubernetes, we've got AWS Lambda as functions, Azure functions. But that transformation is, again, easier said than done. And this is a fantastic piece of research that shows 79% of application modernization efforts fail. So 79% of those projects fail. And again, that's because we're fully refactoring, re-architecting the way an application is built and run. That's, again, a difficult thing to do. So the average organization spends about 16 months on that project, and the average project cost is about $1.5 million. So that application modernization, while it does absolutely have a ton of benefits to deliver to you guys, again, it's a migration and consideration. It's a migration that forces us to consider a number of things. Maybe we have an application that it just doesn't make sense to modernize right now. Maybe we just rebuild that application from scratch in a cloud native modern application sense instead of rebuilding what we already have. Maybe that makes sense. But again, we've got a lot of different options in between. And there is another option, which is VMs on Kubernetes. So this is the KubeVirt project. There's a number of options out there like Red Hat OpenShift Virtualization or SUSE Harvester. But again, this is allowing us to run virtual machines within containerized infrastructure. So we can start to, again, take advantage of some of the benefits that application modernization has without fully re-architecting our application. So we've still got those virtual machines as that atomic unit versus the application being the atomic unit. Now, irrespective of which route you choose to go, whether you're going to go physical to virtual machine to an alternate hypervisor, stay the course, go to a virtual machine in the cloud, go to PaaS services, go Kubernetes, go VMs on Kubernetes, you've always got to ensure that that data is as resilient as possible, right? So at the end of the day, all of these applications run on data. There is going to be some sort of stateful data somewhere, and it is our responsibility to protect that data, even as we move to the cloud. So one of the big misconceptions that we hear is, as I transition to cloud workloads or cloud paths or even Kubernetes, I don't need to protect that data. That's something that the cloud provider is going to take on, or Kubernetes is stateless, so there's nothing to protect. Simply not true. You can see here that as we transition to varying degrees of cloud services, so on-premises on your left, IaaS, PaaS, and then SaaS, we're transitioning varying degrees of responsibility to that cloud provider. But at the top, content, which is your data, is always your responsibility, irrespective of what model you're choosing. So again, it could be a private data center, fully on premises, you're responsible for everything. We could go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is software as a service. So everything below the application is fully managed by the provider, but you are still putting your data on that application. It is your responsibility to protect it. And, of course, I'm going to say that I work for a data protection, a data resilience company, Veeam. But I've got some good examples here of when things go wrong, particularly in the cloud. And I didn't want to call out any one specific cloud, despite some of the recent events. I wanted to show that this is pretty superfluous across all different providers. So starting with AWS back in June of last year, 2023, if you're watching this on demand in a future year, there was an outage of US East 1. That's one of the regional data centers. It's their data center in North Virginia. There was an issue with the capacity management subsystem, which ultimately resulted in a widespread outages for websites for a number of different organizations, news outlets, airlines, transportation authorities. And those outages lasted for more than 2 hours. So, in the grand scheme of things, not a huge amount of time, but ultimately that resulted in, a lot of work for that organization, customer dissatisfaction, people not being able to book their flights, board their flights, look at timetables for, public transit, those kind of things. Maybe the one that stands out for a lot of us and is very fresh in memory, is very wide-reaching, was in July 2024 on Azure. There was a US central data center outage, right? So that's the one in Iowa, and that was caused by the CrowdStrike Falcon Agent patch. And I think everyone here was impacted by this to some degree. I certainly was. My insurance organization was built on this, and I was in the throes of making a claim, and that brought that claim to a screeching halt. But there was unavailability degradation of multiple Azure services, as well as Microsoft 365 apps, and that hit dozens of industries, lasting several hours. Even other organizations that struggled to get back up to speed, it was days or weeks. Delta's a good example. It took them a long time to get things back on track. But these are more widespread outages. There can be smaller outages. So in May of this year, 2024, there was a Google Cloud incident. There's an organization called UniSuper. They are an Australian superannuation fund. So again, this outage was very customer specific, but ultimately there was an inadvertent misconfiguration by Google during the provisioning of those accounts, and it ultimately resulted in the deletion of those organizational accounts. That included all of their data that they had migrated from vSphere on-prem to Google Cloud. And there were more than 600,000 customers, right? Again, superannuation fund, that were unable to access their funds for more than a week. The only reason why this organization was able to recover in a time span less than a week is because they were doing backups, and those backups were not just within Google Cloud, because remember, this hit all of their accounts. They're actually doing cross-cloud backup, and this is something that Veeam advocates for, right? Being able to get your data out of the cloud, not just from a vendor lock-in perspective, but just from this security and recoverability perspective. So this organization was taking backups and actually storing them on Azure, and Google was unable to help. The The geo redundancy, the replication, the resilience built into the platform, again, delivers great availability. But if something goes wrong with the source machine, the replicas, it's going to affect all of those as well. In this instance, all of the accounts. If they were just relying on native snapshots within the cloud, there would have been nothing to recover from. So again, this data freedom notion that Veeam talks about, again, from a migration perspective, but also just from a standard data resilience perspective, being able to get your data out of one platform and into another, so not all your eggs in one basket, are critical. But of course, not all resilience is created equal. So again, this is from our data protection trends report. The number one leading thing is the data protection must be cyber integrated. So data protection is very much seen as a, first-class citizen of any cybersecurity strategy now, because yes, you've got the proactive, preventative component of cybersecurity, but you do have the reactive recovery component as well. If there is a successful event that brings your organization or a specific part of your organization to a halt, you want to be able to recover that. A backup is your best friend there. 41% of organizations said that they need that mobility across clouds. We just went into that, right? The ability to move workloads from one cloud to another, e.g. Amazon to Azure, the ability to move workloads from on-premises to the cloud, the ability to do disaster recovery to a cloud host, and importantly, the ability to standardize protection of on-premises and IaaS policies. Organizations are sick and tired of managing multiple different backup tools from multiple different vendors that don't talk to each other, that are very different, that we need to learn multiple different systems. It's just a pain to manage. Organizations want to standardize that protection for that efficiency, that ease of management, and again, for that adaptability. So we spoke about the crossroads earlier on. Where am I going to have my data today? Where is it going to be tomorrow? Instead of having to procure, provision, manage, maintain, learn, upkeep a completely new data protection solution, they want the existing data protection solution to adapt with it. So that is what leads us to our demos. And these are actually demos of demos. So I'm giving you guys a sneak peek of something that we're going to be releasing to the market, which are these interactive demos that you guys can get hands-on with on demand without having to download a free piece of software and deploy it within your environment, without deploying a real hands-on lab, which again is great from a hands-on experience, but it takes time. We have to carve out maybe an hour or so of our day to do this. These new demos are interactive demos that you can click around, play around with, that are instantly provisioned, available on demand, and it gives you step-by-step what to do. So with these demos and with this notion of data freedom, migration, modernization of applications, I want to give you guys a show of just how easy it is to move data across these different environments with Veeam. So first off, we're going to start with hypervisor to hypervisor migration, right? So for example, vSphere to Hyper-V. So of course it's not working. That's the piece that I need to click. Okay, it's going to bring it up for me. We're doing this live, guys, so bear with me. So here we can see it just opens up a web page, and now it's showing me Veeam backup and replication, and it's giving me all the places I need to click. It gives me a description of everything that I need to do. So here I am. This is a backup of a vSphere virtual machine that I want to recover. I can see that I've got a couple of different restore points. So I'm going to click here, right-click it to select that machine and say, what do I want to do with it? Now, again, Veeam Data Platform offers that unmatched recovery and migration options when it comes to your workload. So you can see here, I can do an instant recovery either to another vSphere host or to Hyper-V. I can recover the entire virtual machine, the disks, the files. I can go to the cloud as well. I can even restore to alternative hypervisors like Nutanix AHV or Proxmox. Again, for this example, we're doing Hyper-V, so we're going to select that one. And it brings up a wizard. Everything within Veeam is wizard driven. It's very seamless. It's very foolproof. So now here I can either add additional machines that I want to migrate, or maybe it's just that single one. So click add. And again, it's just as simple as clicking next, next, next. So I can customize the storage location where my data is going to be migrated to. I'm going to fine tune my network selections as well. Again, this is all pre-migration. This is a great feature as well. So we can have optional security scans before and during the recovery. So that allows us to know if that data is clean of any known threats. So I'm not restoring dirty data or compromised data into my new environment. I can be assured that it is clean and my application and or machine is going to run as I expect it to. After a few more clicks, it's going to go through everything. So you can see here, it's literally taken 1 minute and 41 seconds to migrate from vSphere to Hyper-V. And now that Hyper-V instance is going to be recognizable within my Veeam interface. I can pull that into an existing job. I can create a new job for it. I can continue using the exact same interface that I was using to protect vSphere, to do the migration, to also protect it now that it's on Hyper-V. Even better, it's the exact same license as well. So you don't have to go out and procure a new piece of software. You don't even have to go out and buy additional licenses. You don't even have to launch a license support ticket to do this migration. Perform the migration without ever contacting Veeam. Use the same license to protect the data at its source and at its destination, and you can guarantee that resilience across your environment. Simple as that. Oh, and I can also choose to migrate that to production and turn the machine on as well once it lands there. So that kind of gives you an idea of what these demos are like. Again, you can kind of click around with this, do it in your own time. You don't have to wait for anything to spin up. You saw how quickly it spun up here. So that's one example. Now, if we go back to that data, you guys should remember one of the other big ones, in fact, the biggest one, I think it was 46% of you guys were saying, I want to migrate from likely a VM on premises to the public cloud. So now I'm going to walk you through a demo of how easy it is to do that. This one's going to be vSphere to Azure VM. So I'm just going to click here. By the way, those QR codes, you can scan those if you want and run through this yourself. This is all publicly available. So very similar to before, I'm going to find the machine that I want to migrate. This could be a restoration, by the way, right? Maybe infrastructure is not available on premises in the data center anymore, and I just want to recover this to, in this instance, an Azure VM, but ultimately bring it back, or a migration. A migration is essentially just a planned failover with no intent to ever bring it back. But again, right-click it. I've got my options here. I'm going to select to Microsoft Azure, but again, you can see I can do this to EC2 or Google Cloud Compute Engine VMs. The process is exactly the same, and again, it's all very wizard-driven. So I'm going to find that machine, click through the wizard. Here I'm going to choose the subscription that I'm going to be sending this to, as well as the region. So in Azure, there's more than 60 plus regions across the world. Here, you can see I'm doing this to US East 2, but it could be to any number of those regions. Here, I've also got the opportunity to use a proxy appliance. So this is, it's not enabled by default. It is a recommendation, but you don't have to do it. But the proxy appliance there is just to improve the restore performance, and it does so pretty significantly. But again, click Next. Specify the name that we'd like to assign to the new Azure VM, as well as any tags. And tags are really critical, especially, everywhere, but especially in the public cloud. When we're protecting workloads in the public cloud, we can choose, maybe I'll give you guys a demo of this if we have any time at the end, but you can choose to do so based on all instances within a specific region, subscription, account, project, or we can do so by tags. And tags are critical because we can assign a gold tag, a silver tag, a bronze tag that have different service level objectives assigned to them. That means once this lands in Azure and is powered on, Veeam is going to be able to automatically see that machine, capture it, and apply a policy to it. You don't even have to lift a finger, and it will automatically be protected when it lands at its new destination. Fingers crossed we have some time to do that at the end. Here I select my VM size. So within the public cloud, there's a number of different virtual machine sizes based on compute, memory, storage, networking. In this instance, I'm choosing a standard B2. This is a burstable VM size, but you don't necessarily have to do that. Pick and choose the one that best fits the needs of you and your application. Next, we'll define our resource group. I can choose to place the new virtual machine into an existing resource group or create a new one. If I'm going to create a new one, I give it a name. Specify the virtual network settings that we're going to connect our Azure VM to. Apparently, I've zoomed in there. Network security group. A little summary of the information. Click finish. And you can see here that within a matter of, when did this start? It started at 8:02 p.m. and it finished at 8:06. So 4 minutes, I have migrated, again, a vSphere VM on premises to Azure VM. And here you can see that very same instance running in Azure, powered up. It's running, ready to go, again, just within 4 minutes. So this is, again, the power of Veeam Data Platform beyond just your basic backup and recovery company. Even though we do it better than anyone else out there, it can absolutely be used for migrations. It enables that data freedom. And again, you can protect data at its source and wherever it might reside. Now, one of the other new interesting ones that you had mentioned was, a on-premises hypervisor, again, let's just say vSphere, to a virtual machine on Kubernetes. Now, we've opted in this demo to go with OpenShift virtualization. So OpenShift is a Red Hat product. It's their containerization engine. OpenShift virtualization, again, is just the ability to run virtual machines on containerized infrastructure. Now, Veeam cannot do the migration here. So what I'm actually going to show you a demo of here is what's called the MTV tool. No, it's not a music channel. MTV is Red Hat's migration tool to get you, again, from, in this case, vSphere to Hyper-V. So let's go through and run through this one just to, again, show you how easy it is. So we can see over here we've got some virtual machines that are running within our legacy vSphere environment, and we're going to migrate a few of those machines over. So we head over to our Red Hat OpenShift cluster interface. The MTV tool, the migration toolkit for virtualization operator, is an optional install. We've pre-installed it here, but you can just go through and install that if you would like. We're going to click down here at providers for virtualization. So this is where we're going to see our host, which is our host cluster, our target cluster, as well as VMware, right? So this is where we're migrating things from. We're going to click plans for virtualization. So this is where we create a plan, all the different steps that will be orchestrated against those 3 VMs on premises. Of course, we've got vSphere. We're going to use those. Let's go through and select our different machines. It's apparently these 3. We click next. So then we go and give our plan a name. We'll select a target namespace within OpenShift to where we want to migrate those virtual machines. Here we're just using VM examples because this is a demo environment after all. Then we select our target storage class and create that migration plan. Now that plan is created, saved, and now I can just choose to hit start migration. Start again. It starts running, so we can see here that 0 of the 3 VMs have been migrated. And we can see the breakdown of that over here. And now we can see they're all running within our new environment. Now, again, Veeam has the ability to protect virtual machines on Kubernetes. Red Hat OpenShift virtualization support was released in our custom product just earlier this year in version 7.0. But you can also go even like an agent-based approach if that's something that you're more familiar with. Again, Veeam is all about options. Even with public cloud virtual machines, you can choose to natively protect those, which I think we're going to have time for a demo for, or you can choose to protect them using agents as well. There's pros and cons to each one, but again, this is just to show you just how easy it is to utilize Veeam or even third-party tools to to migrate data from environment to environment based on what your organizational requirements are. And again, more importantly, making sure that that data is resilient at its source, at its new destination, no questions asked from Veeam. I think we've got the time, so let's go through and give you guys, this is actually a real demo versus Storylane, but we will be creating those for this. So this is the Veeam backup for AWS proxy appliance. It's licensed through, of course I've forgotten my password. Let's go back to the PowerPoint while I figure out what to do here. So there's a number of considerations that you need to make before you migrate. And I do want to point these out because not all environments are created equally. So compatibility is the first one. Does the new platform support all your existing applications, infrastructures, and services that you utilize right now? And again, this question and all these questions should be asked of your existing data protection solution as well. If I'm going to be migrating from one platform that is currently supported to a new platform that is not supported, do I have the appetite to go out there and procure an all new data protection or data resilience solution just for that new environment? Or do I really want to standardize, again, like a number of those organizations mentioned earlier? Next up is flexibility. So does the new platform have the ability to grow and adapt with the change in business needs? Again, this is a great example for Red Hat OpenShift. Going from vSphere on-premises to containers, Red Hat OpenShift is an application modernization. Refactoring is required. It's a lot of steps. Having that interim step, that VMs on Kubernetes, is a great option. But again, the same needs to be asked of your existing platform. Is that going to give me the flexibility that I need? And Veeam absolutely does. Cost. Cost is always an important one, especially in the public cloud. In fact, it's the most important consideration in the public cloud. Whether you're an SMB all the way to the largest enterprise, cost control is the number one challenge in the public cloud. So does my current and or new solution have the ability to help me control costs in the cloud and align to my budgetary requirements from a TCO perspective? So this isn't just the licensing for the data protection solution itself or for the platform solution itself. It's the TCO, right? So the networking, the storage, the compute, all within that, particularly in the public cloud where that's paid per what you use. And then finally, security, right? Security is still the hot word on everyone's lips alongside AI. Does the new platform possess those features and integrations to help me ensure security and compliance in my new platforms? Not all platforms are created equally. Even if they do have equal capabilities, the way in which you do it is very different, or sometimes less so different. So for example, air gapping. Let's choose that. Air gapping, as we know it on premises in the data center today, is, let's say we archive a backup onto tape, eject that tape. There's that physical air gap between the tape media and the reader. So even if someone negotiates access into your environment, they cannot access that tape. They would have to physically break into the premises and destroy that tape. In the public cloud, where we're dealing with something that is always connected to the network, how do we ensure that air gapping? So for example, here it's logical air gapping. So using things like identity and access management to broker minimum or least privilege access. I might call it zero trust principles, but least privilege access between things like production accounts and protection accounts, making sure that pipe is as small as possible. So personnel and applications only have the minimum number of permissions to perform their role, no more, no less. We continually rotate those permissions. So again, the outcome is the same: air gapping, logical air gapping. Just the way in which we do it might be a little bit different. All right, let's see if I can get back to here. I believe this is the right one. Maybe I changed my password and I just don't remember what I changed it to. I think it's this. I guess I want to update the password so I don't suffer another embarrassing moment like this. P.S. When I log in here, I do have the option to turn multi-factor authentication on as well, but for the interest of this demo, we want to keep things as streamlined as possible. So this is Veeam Backup for AWS. It's the proxy appliance that's deployed, managed, licensed by Veeam Backup and Replication, and gives me that ability to natively protect data within AWS. So you can see here, we can protect EC2 instances, databases, file systems. So EC2 are virtual machines. These are the PaaS services that we spoke about earlier. Databases that we support are all 6 different flavors of Amazon RDS. We support Amazon Aurora, DynamoDB. File systems, we support EFS, FSX, and Redshift as well. So lots of breadth of coverage depending on what you choose throughout your journey. But protecting these workloads is super, super easy. I'm going to use EC2, as an example and show you that tagging piece that I mentioned earlier. So let's go out. Actually, let's not create a new policy. Let's edit this existing one. So this is for demo purposes only. I apparently cannot type either. Click next, and here's where we choose our sources. I was talking about IAM roles earlier, those functions. This is where we would pick the IAM roles for performing the data backup, data restore. I can choose to check those permissions right here, right now, if I wish. And which region or regions do I want to protect? So right now, I'm only looking at US East North Virginia. I can choose to bring all of these over if I want complete visibility into that environment. And then we're going to specify the resources that we want to protect. So again, like I said earlier, do we want to protect all of those resources within all of those regions, or do we only want to protect specific resources within those regions? And I can do that on an instance basis or tags. So remember, we could assign those tags earlier on, and maybe we want to choose a tag that says migrated. And I can choose to add a migrated tag here and choose to. So anything that gets migrated automatically gets captured into this policy and is protected. That's really just how easy it is. Hit apply. Do we want to exclude any resources? Again, I can do that by instance or by tag. Do we want to exclude specific volumes from those backups? Next up, we look at the guest processing. So we can do application-aware snapshots for both Windows and Linux instances. For Windows, we use the SSM agent. But you can also do any guest scripting as well, should you choose to do that. Next, we look at targets. So do we want to do just snapshots only? Do we want to replicate those snapshots? And do we want to do backups? The answer to that is yes. I gave you that UniSuper example earlier on. Absolutely do backups. Where do we want to store those backups? Here I've just got a standard S3 bucket. I can choose to do archives for long-term retention as well. This is an S3 Glacier Deep Archive bucket. These can be immutable, by the way, as well. Critical security consideration that we spoke about earlier, but immutability is critical as well. I'm going to turn replication off. And then I go to my schedule. So again, this is true policies. I've got my dailies, weeklies, monthlies, and even yearlies. I can easily change these settings just by going in here and selecting which hours do I want to take my snapshots, which hours do I want to do my backups, and how many do I want to do per hour. Again, this is a great benefit of Veeam over other products, is that we don't limit you in terms of attaining your service level objectives. If you want to take 60 snapshots an hour, one every minute, go for it. Maybe it's a mission critical application. Snapshots to keep. How many do I want to keep? My backups. How many of those do I want to keep? And again, it's very similar for weeklies, except we see just the days of the week here, and monthlies. And yep, you guessed it, months of the year here. Hit next. Do we want to copy tags from those source volumes to the backups? Typically, yes, is the best practice. Some general settings. If a policy fails to execute, how many times do we want to automatically retry it? Do we want to enable a health check? So this is a CRC check for metadata within the backup to verify its integrity. And then I can choose to turn on email notifications as well. I don't have any emails configured within the configuration component up here right now. But for example, I could choose this to notify me if there is a failed attempt at a policy through my email. We also spoke about cost earlier, right? And this is from a TCO perspective. I can tell you that per workload is one Veeam Universal license in AWS. But how much is the infrastructure going to cost me? Veeam gives me a proactive forecast of this based on those settings. So I can go in and I can change these settings. I want to keep, I don't know, maybe I'm doing non-best practices. I'm going to keep 365 snapshots, and I'm going to keep backups for, I don't know, 7 years, because months, what's that, 84 months, because I'm a heavily regulated industry. And if you look up here, my cost just changed, right? And it's broken it all down for me. This is how much I'm spending on snapshots, zero on replicas because I turned that off, my backups. But again, I can go in and change all of these settings and really start to see how this is affecting my my price. So anyway, that's an example of just how to protect data. Recovery is very, very simple as well. All of these restore points are all visible within VBR as well once they land in that S3 bucket. So if I want to restore from EC2 to an Azure VM or bring it back on premises, maybe I over-rotated with my migration strategy and I want to go back to vSphere, can absolutely do that. Again, no questions asked from Veeam. You can use the VBR toolset to perform that migration. And again, the same license to protect it in AWS, on premises, wherever it might be. All right, let's go back and see if I can find my slides. Here they are. We're on the home stretch, guys. So, that really kind of brings things full circle. The Veeam portfolio is really just full of products that make that data resilience and recoverability extremely achievable for you guys, irrespective of where it's hosted. So we really believe that resilience is founded on these 5 principles: the ability to back up that data, the ability to recover that data, the freedom to move that data wherever we choose to see fit, which has, of course, been the key topic of this conversation. The ability to secure that data, again, backup is a key component of data security from that remediative perspective. And then data intelligence, yes, monitoring and analytics, but also leveraging things like artificial intelligence to help us do more with less, work smarter, not harder, gain valuable information that's within that production fresh data within our backups. And then we utilize those native APIs to protect all of these different environments: cloud, virtual, physical, enterprise applications, your unstructured data like NAS or object storage, SaaS applications like Microsoft 365, Salesforce, and your containerized applications that are being orchestrated by Kubernetes. We are not trying to take a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to protecting these. We want to take a native approach because native means the best degree of resilience for that workload. But we still do that all under one common portfolio. Kind of give you just an idea of how extensive that workload coverage is. I mean, this isn't even scratching the surface, but AWS, Azure, Google, we've spoken about extensively. We've got vSphere, Hyper-V, Nutanix AHV, Proxmox, Red Hat, whether that's OpenShift virtualization, OpenShift all up. KVM is a flavor of Linux, Microsoft applications, Mac OS, a number of different databases. We've got NAS, object storage, Microsoft 365, Salesforce, Kubernetes, and all of the different things that come with that, all the different types of distributions. And some cool, exciting things coming soon. Just earlier this year, we released support for some new PaaS services in the cloud, like Amazon FSx, Amazon Redshift, Azure Cosmos DB. We've got some great new things coming in 2024. Virtual Machine, Proxmox VE. We've got a new database support, MongoDB. If MongoDB is the data service that's powering your Kubernetes applications, by the way, that's already supported, as well as some new exciting workloads. So like ID as a service with Microsoft Entra ID, as well as Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. So, really with Veeam, the world is your oyster, irrespective of how you choose to host your applications and data today or tomorrow. We can help you execute against your application modernization strategy, digital transformation, dare I say it. I'll put a dollar in the swear jar there. But irrespective of what that is, we will help you achieve that and make sure that that data is properly protected wherever it might reside. We also just released the 2024 Gartner Magic Quadrant, which shows Veeam, again, as number 1 market share worldwide, more than 550,000 customers, and as being recognized as the highest in ability to execute for the 5th consecutive time and a leader for the 8th time. So this is, again, Veeam's prowess. You don't get that prowess by focusing just on a single platform or a handful of platforms. We want to be able to support all of those platforms and empower you to move that data as you see fit. So that kind of brings it full circle. I've noticed a number of questions coming in through the chat, so we'll make sure that we answer those as we go. Well, I've been making sure to answer those as we go along. Any stragglers, I'll be sure to answer those. If you do want to engage with the Veeam community, join the Veeam Community Hub or follow us on any of these social media platforms. You can post your questions there as well. Veeam experts are here and at the ready to help you. Oh, here's another interesting question. It kind of goes back to the VMs on Kate. So I showed Veeam doing the migration from vSphere to Hyper-V and vSphere to Azure VM. Why didn't I use Veeam to do the migration from vSphere to Red Hat OpenShift virtualization? It's a very good question. Really it just kind of comes down to not all tools are created equally. Veeam doesn't necessarily have a means or product today that can migrate from vSphere to OCPV. OCPV is OpenShift virtualization. It's that MTV tool that really is the tool of choice there. It's been purposefully designed by Red Hat to do that migration, and it can also perform live prior to that cutover. So that helps minimize your downtime during that migration. So good question. Just thought I'd cover that off. But thanks for joining this webinar. I've appreciated having you on. I hope you found this insightful. The slides will be sent to you afterwards. If you didn't manage to catch those QR codes, whether it is for the Gartner Magic Quadrant, I'll quickly flash that up on screen here. If you want to have a play around with those cool interactive demos, please do let us know your thoughts in the chat. But here's the one to show you from hypervisor to hypervisor. Here's the one from hypervisor to cloud. And here's the one from hypervisor to a virtual machine on Kubernetes. Again, these will be included. Please let us know your thoughts on these. We want to create them for pretty much every scenario possible. I think it will be an invaluable tool for you guys. I hope you feel the same. But thank you once again for joining this webinar, and we will see you on another one soon.